Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to episode 27 of the Music Mind podcast. Today my special guest is Tomoko Omura, a wonderful jazz violinist and composer based in New York City. Originally from Japan, Tomoko has etched out an amazing life in creative music. Please enjoy my conversation with the wonderful Tomoko Omura. Well, hi, Tomoko, and welcome to the Music Mind podcast. It's great to have you here today, all the way from New York, for episode 27 in the series.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Our audience have just seen and heard a wonderful quartet arrangement of the jazz standard Sweet Georgia Brown. Really beautifully played, beautifully recorded and shot. The first thing I want to talk about, the violin's an old instrument. It's over 500 years old. But you're playing a much more modern looking version of the violin. You're playing a 5-string version. Can you tell me a little bit about that beautiful instrument you're playing in that clip?
Yes, my five string this from this video was I was playing London 5 model. And it's manufactured and then sold in the States. A lot of people love the instrument, so I got to try it recently, and then I decided to play on it. I have a different, actually, five strings. I have three five-string violin, and each one has a different sound. And yeah, I've been on a big journey finding what I like. How about, yeah.
Yes. That particular instrument, what I was blown away with was how natural it sounds. I noticed you had a pickup in it of some sort. You had a lead coming out of it, and into a little tiny acoustic type amp there. But the sound is very natural.
Yes, London 5 has a very natural sounding pickup. The pickup is so good that I sometimes don't need microphone. But for that video, I blended both microphones and the pickup, probably 50-50. And then so that I have a little more like acoustic sounding.
That's certainly the effect. Absolutely beautiful. Now, the sound on your violin is gorgeous, but the sound on the other three instruments is equally beautiful. You've got a wonderful drummer, piano player, and bassist there. I believe the piano player might be your husband. Is that correct?
It is correct. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the three gentlemen who's supporting you there? Because they do a wonderful job. It's very, very good.
We can start with my husband. Glenn Zaleski is playing the piano and my band for a long time. And then he's been playing the longest with me, and we've been together the longest. And then Pablo Menares is from Chile, and we've been playing for also a long time. And also the Jay Sawyer on the drums. He's from Michigan, Grand Rapids. And those two, the bassist and the drummer, they joined the band after Glenn, and we recorded 2 albums together, Branches Volume 1 and 2. We recorded the end of 2018. So yeah, it's been a long time playing together, and it's amazing to play with them because they know what I'm thinking. They make me sound good.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about how you approach improvisation, because Sweet Georgia Brown, I think it was written in 1925, and it's been played by all of the great players, including Stefan Grappelli, the great gypsy jazz violinist. But your approach is different. You seem to be playing in a lovely, relaxed, reserved manner with your improvisation. There's no urgency to play a million meaningless notes, which is pretty common, unfortunately, in jazz often. Are you singing a melody as you play? Tell me about how do you approach it?
Great question. I tried to make a story and also have a conversation with the musicians that I'm playing with at that time. And I think the storytelling is a very important part in my music making lately. So I try to make a story when I'm improvising, but not so much like showcasing my, like, the virtuosity of the instrument. The violin is an very, I think, important instrument to showcase the virtuosity in general because of the history and the tradition of the classical music. It's such a high level virtuosity in the instrument, but I think I'm not really going for that direction there. Like I'm trying to navigate my improvisation in the moment and try to capture what I'm thinking or what I'm singing in my head. And oftentimes maybe not as showy enough, maybe for the most amazing solo in the jazz history, but I just play my honest feeling and try to communicate with the people.
I've got to congratulate you on that because it's such a refreshing change. I think as instrumentalists, it's so easy to get caught on the merry-go-round of being the fastest and the loudest and the cleverest on our instrument. But I don't sense that with you at all. And also, I don't sense it with your accompanists. All of those players who were supporting you play like you. They play, I suppose, reserved. I don't know what the right word is, reserved, respectful. And I also liked how, as a group, you said everything that needed to be said on that jazz classic in 4 minutes, not 4 hours. Because, that's one of the frustrating, and I don't care whether it's John Coltrane or anyone, I just nod off as it enters the 16th chorus where everything seemed to be said in the second chorus. So I think you're a wonderful example, particularly to younger players, of being able to tell your story in a couple of choruses in such a melodic way. Now, you were born in Japan, but I think you've spent almost half of your life in America. Have you? Tell us about your beginnings growing up in Japan, those early years.
I was never being raised to become a musician. My mother taught me the violin, and she was my violin teacher till when I was 17. I almost quit there. I quit at that time as a teenager because I was fighting with my mother. And I was not good practicer. I hated practicing. I wish I did more practicing then, but I wasn't inspired to pursue the fine playing on the violin. But I always loved music, and I was playing different instruments growing up. I played percussion instruments. I was in a marching band, and I'm playing the snare drums and the cymbals and timpanis. And then also I was very heavily into Baroque recorder.
Okay.
So I was playing, yeah, and also I was in a recorder orchestra and playing the huge recorder. It sounds so beautiful because it sounds like a pipe organ, but again, a jazz intonation is such a pure harmony. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I was so into it that I was giving concert as a high school student in the local area. I was
Yeah.
playing with some adult musicians there. And violin, I felt like it was the least instrument that I could express myself. I used to also play piano and accompanying the choir when I was in the elementary school. The violin felt like not so natural. And though I was in a youth orchestra and I just enjoyed playing the music, but not really enthusiastic about the violin.
Was it classical music up to that point? You said your mother was teaching you strictly classical or a bit of mix of music?
Never mixed. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a classical only. That's what it was available on the violin. It seems in Japan, playing pop music or like, the folk music in Japan, like they don't use violin. So that's not really an option.
How did you discover jazz or creative music or any other type of music, I guess, other than classical? How did that come about?
I have a brother who's 4 years older than me, and he was listening to um, Jimi Hendrix and Jaco Pastorius and Miles Davis and
Yeah.
Radiohead um, and one day I heard beautiful music that I've never heard from his room, the next door. So I just had to run to his door and knocked his room. It's like, what was that you were listening to? And he said it was The Kind of Blue by Miles Davis.
Okay.
So that was the start, and I fell in love with the sound. I've never heard such a beautiful thing. And I was a junior high school student that time. And I started going to like used CD shops or the local music store and then collecting a lot of jazz CDs then, compilation
Yeah.
albums and yeah, Bobby Timmons or some like Miles Davis later albums
Yes.
like On the Corner or Charlie Parker, Clifford Brown. And
Yeah.
then I decided that, wow, this music really, speaks to me that I want to play someday. But I didn't know that I could do it on the violin at the time. And then maybe when I was high school student, I heard Stefan Grappelli.
Yeah.
My mother bought the album, and oh, you can play jazz on the instrument. That's amazing. But
Yeah.
then the Stefan Grappelli, I mean, he's amazing, phenomenal player, but it was such a different sound from Miles Davis that I was in love at the moment. And then, like, I don't know, like maybe I should pick up saxophone or, trumpet or some
Okay.
horns that I like. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't thinking to do that on the violin yet. Then, when I was graduating from the high school, I decided that I'm going to this university and they have a club activity run by students who does jazz very seriously
Ah.
without teacher. And then
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
going to join them and I'm going to play on the violin because violin is the only instrument that maybe can do the complicated stuff. Recorders, maybe not
No.
so much on the jazz.
No.
It would be difficult. So I decided to do that on the violin. So I already had that in mind before going to the university. And then I went to the university and this club activity, that was called Modern Jazz Society. And
Okay.
a lot of professional jazz musicians in Japan actually do that process. Like you go to universities and then join the club activities run by students, and they do jazz pretty seriously.
Were you studying something formally at the university or just attending that jazz workshop?
I went to the university because I wanted to learn psychology. I was
Okay.
interested in psychology, Freud and Jung.
Yes.
But then the first year, they do this interview and essay exam, and then miserably, I failed it. And then I
A
lost the
message
reason to
from
be,
God there. A
yeah,
message from God, like
yeah,
pick up the violin.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was pretty depressed and like, I already moved to a different city and I was living alone, like away from my parents and enjoying the life, but I had no reason to go to the university. So I had to pick another major to study there. And I picked education. Oh, okay. But I was not intending to become a teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher then.
Yeah.
So I just skipped classes and stayed in the jazz activity room and I just played, whatever. I would read jazz magazines and just
Yeah.
try to play Omnibus
Yeah.
by Charlie Parker. And then,
Well, you ended up being a great outcome from how you have largely at that stage, I guess, taught yourself. Because I assume in that jazz workshop there was no teacher; it was just people playing together, jamming. Is that what it was largely there?
yeah, like daily jam was happening at the
Yeah,
club. And then there's no teachers, so no formal training of how to
yeah,
practice that music. Just we listen to the music together and then try to find out what it is
yeah.
about.
When you changed the type of music, what did the violin feel like? Did it feel more natural to you or not?
I think it's not natural because I was trying to play like a saxophone, like alto saxophone, like Charlie Parker.
Yeah, okay.
And the language was so difficult on the violin, and I couldn't even play the omnibus solo when he's doing all the
Yeah.
16 notes and the 32nd notes
Oh, yeah.
uh and I was depressed that maybe like I just don't have the technique and the talent, so many discouragements along the
Wow.
way. But then I just kept going because I was the only violinist in the club, and it's kind of nice to be able to create your own sound. And
Yes. You
yeah,
you
I
play
just
it you play it so beautifully, and I've got to share with you that Charlie Parker is incredibly difficult to play on the saxophone, not just on the violin. So you shouldn't have been depressed that you found that hard to play. He was one of a kind, one of the true legends in music. I want to just play a little short clip now on your social media. I think it's on your YouTube channel. You have this lovely series of where you're just playing transcriptions. You're filming yourself as you're playing transcriptions, and you've got a lovely one of of Joy Spring, the Clifford Brown
Oh
classic.
gosh.
So I just
Yes.
want to play a little bit of this. Obviously, this is going back many years. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance for you of playing transcriptions. Playing transcriptions can be really difficult, and writing them out can be doubly as hard. That transcription of Joy Spring, was that from a book that someone else had transcribed, or was that something you had physically transcribed?
I physically transcribed.
What's your approach to doing that? To being able to get a great solo and Clifford Brown solo, wow, and then to be able to capture that into notes. What is the process you use?
I just stop, pause, and start. That's my
Yeah,
process.
that's right.
Pause, rewind,
Yeah.
start again.
Wow.
Pause, rewind, start again. Because
yeah.
until I can really hear the interval. So but okay, I didn't
Yeah.
catch that. Like until I get the notes right. And then just pause and then I write it down right away so that I don't forget.
Do you physically write it, or do you type it into music notation?
Physically write. I always handwritten
Oh,
because
wow.
it's
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It's good for my ear. It's like a partially ear training for me so that I can hear that better. Like,
And Clifford Brown's an interesting character because sadly he was killed in a car accident at 25. Now,
yes.
most of the jazz legends took themselves out through alcohol
Mm.
and drug abuse, but Clifford steered clear of all of that. What's your take on the right balance of finding yourself versus copying other people?
Great question. It takes enormous amount of study to sound like someone, actually.
Yes.
That's an accomplishment. I believe that your individual sound will come through anyway. And then you might go into the phase, okay, right now I only like this artist. And you just sound like that person. And then the next phase, you might be another person. But it's like a history. You're building that sound in your playing. So I'm not so worried about it. I think it's as long as you keep your mind open.
And I guess not get fixated on one artist. I always remember a story
Yeah.
that the late Dave Sanborn, the wonderful contemporary alto saxophonist, he passed away recently. But he
Mhm.
said in the early days when he was starting to have some big hits, he would tour Japan, your home country, and he was
Mhm.
absolutely devastated that everywhere he went, he saw young Japanese alto saxophonists
Mhm.
copying every aspect of his playing. And what
Ah.
Dave was particularly concerned about, Dave suffered polio bad as a child, and long
Mm.
before they had a vaccine for it.
Mm.
Apparently, he spent a couple of years in an iron lung, really serious problem as a child with polio. So when Dave played, he sort of played with a somewhat crippled left hand. That
Mhm.
was just a result of his polio. He said he went to Japan and here's 100 young alto saxophonists all playing with his left hand technique. And it just, I suppose that is always in my mind about you've got to be careful not
Mm.
to idolize your idols to the point where you really become just a copycat version of them.
Mhm.
Now, I just want to talk about reading
Mhm.
music versus playing by ear, because many of the jazz legends, the absolute legends, players like Django Reinhardt, Errol Garner, Wes Montgomery, Chet Baker, never read a note of music. And in contemporary, if we come forward, Paul McCartney of Beatles fame can't read or write a note of music. Neither can Eric Clapton or the great Australian acoustic guitar player Tommy Emmanuel. Now, none of those, I think, wear that with a badge of honour. I've certainly heard Tommy Emmanuel saying many times, look, if he had his time over again, he'd love to learn to read music, but it just wasn't an option for him. What's your take there on the balance between being a reading musician and a genuine improvising musician? Do you see the need for a balance?
Well, I think reading music is a good skill to have, and it doesn't mean that, I mean, if you were reading some music and improvising, um, it doesn't mean that you are less on the improvisation. I think because some of the music nowadays is very intricate and have so many sections, and a lot of musicians read music on the stage, and I think it's okay. It doesn't have to be memorized all the time, and um, but when you're improvising, I think it's I get often trapped uh by the visual information if I have to read the charts like a chord progression.
Yes.
I play way better if I'm not looking at the music. So yeah, I think it's a separate thing. Though nowadays in the modern jazz scenes, it's good to be able to read well.
I think you sound like in agreement to me. I try to sit on the fence with that. I always, and I teach a lot of people a lot of different instruments, but I always say to people, it's no burden to be a great reader, but I think it is a burden that if the music falls off the music stand in the middle of Happy Birthday, to not be able to finish Happy Birthday to you because you can't see the music. So I think 50-50 to me. Keep up your reading chops, but also
Hmm.
definitely, I totally agree with you. If you're improvising, I think having the music there, and it's something I don't hear in your playing. I love when you improvise that it doesn't sound like, oh, hang on, there's a 2-5-1 progression there. If I use a Dorian scale, that will fit those three chords. It doesn't sound to me like, you don't sound like you're playing scales. You're singing songs to me. And I think that's the greatest gift you can have as a musician. Tell a
Oh,
story.
thank you.
Tell a story. Now, I want to move forward a little bit. You did an album, a successful album called Branches Volume 2. And you've got a lovely little clip. I'm just going to play this. It's only about a minute, where it's a look in the recording session, a little take of different little parts of you. You've got your quartet, your Sweet Georgia Brown quartet, but Jeff Miles comes in on electric guitar for this.
Mhm.
Beautiful sound on the guitar. The quartet is sounding wonderful as always. Let's have a look at this. You've got a great little clip that just shows you all in the studio working on Branches Volume 2. How do you approach composition? Do you have a set process or does it change depending on what the task is?
I think I try to sing in my head first more than playing the violin or piano. Like it has to come to my mind first. And I sometimes like have this melodic fragment and I record on my voice memos on my phone. But yeah, I would just come up in my head and I would try to play that on the piano or on the instruments and then see how I feel. And then put the bass notes under it and make lines together. And oh, what chord is that? Like I have to think, but like, and then yeah, that's the process. So melody first and then the bass.
Have you ever had an experience where a composition you've woke up and a composition's just there? It's in your mind and you sit down and it's there, or is it a labour of love largely where it's hard work? You've got to chip away at that composition until you get what you want.
I never have like a complete compositions in my head, but sometimes I would have like the first page done already.
Okay.
But then I have to develop it. And how I develop is I think the most important part. If it can make the composition alive or dead.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
like how like the first page is pretty easy, and then how
Okay.
I like manage to finish
Yeah.
is
You write some beautiful compositions. Like the only reason I asked that, I remember hearing a podcast or something where they interviewed Paul McCartney, and the most re-recorded song in the history of music is Yesterday, the beautiful song
mm.
that McCartney, and he said he just woke up with that entire song in his mind. He sat down at the piano, the entire melody and chords, but he didn't have the words. So he was just singing ham and eggs instead of yesterday. It was just gibberish. But he said he couldn't believe it. He just woke up and there is that song in its entirety. He had
Oh,
to work on the lyrics. So I
that's an
guess it
amazing story.
isn't that an amazing story?
Yeah.
Now, Charlie Parker, I first heard Charlie Parker, my brother, like you, I've got a brother that's 4 years older than me, and he's a great
Oh, okay.
professional guitarist, lived a
Oh,
life as a
wow.
professional guitarist. And he went to guitar lessons and I tagged along. Mum would take him to guitar lessons. And I hadn't had any interest in music, but like everything, if my brother was doing something, I'd like to sit in and see what he's doing. His guitar teacher, who was actually a banjo player from the vaudeville era, I'm going way back now, 50 years ago, gave both of us a record of Charlie Parker. He said, "You two boys should go home and have a listen to this." I don't remember which one it was. It might have been Parker with strings. I think it might
Oh,
have been
wow.
that one. And so we go home. We're at that stage, we're listening only to pop music. The Monkees were a famous TV show on from America, and that was our idea of music, that sort of thing. So we get home, we
Okay.
put the record needle down on Charlie Parker, and we just couldn't understand it. It just sounded like gibberish. I remember the two of us saying, we just sort of said, we're going to have to bring this record back. And so the next week, thanks very much. And he said, did you listen to it? Yeah, yeah, not really us. And I think, probably 10 or 15 years later, I bought that record and it meant a
Mm.
whole lot more to me. 15
Oh,
years down, I'm
wow.
sitting back thinking, wow, talk about improvisational genius. And I want to play now. You've got a wonderful clip, Relaxin' at Camarillo, which is a Parker
Oh,
song. And this is a trio, no drummer this time. This is a really gorgeous trio version of that song. Can you tell us who the two players are, the guitar player and the bass player? They're different players from your quartet. Who are they?
yes. I always make out new album with as a reaction to the old one, and always want to do something different. And I just wanted to have a gypsy jazz instrumentation, so drumless and with a violin, guitar, bass, and but not sounding like a typical gypsy jazz.
No.
I think I'm very rebellious. Anyway, But the guitarist is a wonderful Alex Goodman from Canada.
Okay.
And the bass player is George Delancey from Ohio. We all met in New York, and we have so many common friends and musicians, and we got together. And I mean, I knew they're playing from just watching concerts in general in New York, and they were wonderful, and I wanted to ask them, and they were available. So, and they were such a kind musician that I wanted to be with. So I just formed up a band, and yeah.
This is extraordinary. This is an extraordinary clip. It really is. Now, you're obviously all in a studio playing together at the same time, but the video is sort of, you know, it's managed to fit the three of us on the screen, and you can see each other reacting. The bass solo in this, I got the chance to see Neil Hennings Orsted Peterson play with Oscar.
Oh, wow.
I got to see
yes.
here in Australia. They come over to it. Yeah. And this bass player, it really reminded me of how Neil makes solos with Oscar Peterson. He does an outrageously good solo here. You play beautifully and relaxed. The guitarist is fantastic. I love you do your little horn stabs during their solo on the violin, the little bup, bup, bup. I love what you do there. Let's have a look and a listen to this wonderful trio, relaxing at Camarillo, celebrating the music of the great Charlie Parker. there's a concept in America called Jazz House Kids. Now, I looked up this website, and this is a beautiful concept. Tell us about your work with Jazz House Kids in New York. What is it, and what's your role there?
Well, they've been amazing organization for a long time, but they were based in New Jersey, Montclair, and they have a really amazing community there. And now they branched out in one in Manhattan, and this program is actually totally for free to learn for kids.
Great.
It's amazing. I wish I had that in my hometown. But
Yeah.
yeah, any kids who's 12 plus can apply and study jazz for free. And I'm leading the string program there, and I'm giving them arrangements and the concepts to practice. And yeah, it's been since since last year. It's pretty
Wow.
brand new thing. I'm starting a new program in Bronx. Actually, starting next week. I'm gonna go to the Performing Arts High School, and I'm bringing a new jazz strings curriculum to this Performing Arts High School string students. And then that's part of the also Jazz House Kids, and I'm leading the program. So it's gonna be a big adventure for me. First
Oh,
time leading
yeah.
the kids.
What a wonderful way to give back too. Imagine, I was
Mhm.
just thinking when you're saying that, I'd love to be a 12-year-old kid thinking I'd like to play a bit of jazz strings, and you rock up and you're my teacher. Oh, OMG, what a inspiration that would be. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're a cat owner. That cat must be a cool jazz cat to be living with you guys.
Oh,
You're a
she's the best.
you're a composer, you're a performer, you're an educator. How do you find a balance? How do you balance all of those amazing responsibilities? Tell us about that, because there will be a lot of women watching this, and younger girls perhaps still at school. They see someone like you play and think, wow, geez, I'd like to live that sort of creative life. But the school system largely is telling them that, they might have to get a job. They might have to be a nurse or a radiologist or a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer. The school guidance counselor doesn't generally say, have you thought of being a jazz violinist? Yeah, when they're talking to kids. But tell us about, you're living that life. How do you piece all of that together? How do you do it?
I think I'm not usually career minded enough or business minded enough to do stuff. That's how I feel about myself as a musician. Like, I'm not on top of things sometimes. I'm just kind of I love daydreaming, and I love just creating stuff. That's what I love to do. And so that part is very important to me. Keep creating. So I want to have a place to always do that in my life. So that's my agenda. Like, so if I'm, doing mother stuff, or,
Yeah.
housework and then childcare, and
Yep.
then um, if I don't do that creative stuff at all, then my heart will be in a miserable um status that I cannot do the
Yeah.
child caring
I understand what you're
happily.
saying.
Happily.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I always reserve the time, like, to create.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to do, but I have to, because otherwise I won't survive. So yeah, that's it. I think other thing, like, I'm not thinking about career advancing or that kind of thing, but just I need to keep creating and putting the work so that I can share to the world. Because sharing to the world is, I think, a contribution to the community.
Now, the reality of of making a living, money and music have never been good bedfellows, ever. You know, how, and you've got the situation there where you've got a musician as a husband. How
Hmm.
do you guys as a family balance that reality that you have to be able to eat, you have to be able to pay the rent and pay the bills? How
Hmm.
have you juggled this thing of not selling your soul to make a living?
Right. And then we have a child, and the child care is very, very expensive in New
Yeah,
York.
yeah.
But we've been in New York for a long time. I moved here 2010.
Okay.
And in 2009, I was in New Jersey for a year. But I could count that as a New York time because it was
Yes.
close to New York. And the first year in New York, it was miserable. I just didn't have any money. And it was in Jersey City. And in Jersey City, the heat is not included. And then um
Oh, wow.
in the winter, we got the bill, and then it was like $400, and oh no, I don't have any money left in my bank. And
Yeah.
then like we like I had a roommate then, and like we shut the
Shared the
heater,
bills. Yeah.
and then we were
Yeah.
covering with the blankets. I
Mm.
had a similar situation in Boston right before I moved to New Jersey. Like I just didn't have much money then. Like I was struggling to pay the bill, and I didn't have much gig. I was actually touring folk musician that time for several bands.
Okay.
Yeah, I was playing fiddle and world music and touring the New England and maybe Midwest, playing for folk festivals and the world music festivals and
Good.
the
Yeah.
Performing Arts Center. But it was not enough to have a comfortable life. So
Mm.
I didn't spend much, and then I was doing some um yeah, like Japanese tutoring or whatever I could find. Like I was struggling. And then it took a long time to feel like, okay, I'm okay now. But it took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
But I didn't mind because New York was so inspiring in the jazz scene, and I was learning so much by just being there and being able to hear the amazing music every night and meeting new people and new musicians that I could play. And if I write something and if I hire something and pay them, they would play my music.
Yeah.
The New York jazz community is amazing. And then so I stuck there, and I'm glad I did because it took many, many years to feel okay, I think I can make living. But it did eventually because now I know enough people and enough
Yeah.
way to do things.
In the capital of jazz, you've had to work for years to get to the point where you're saying you can comfortably make a living playing at the standard that you play. I think that's a wonderful reality check. Is
Mm.
it critical to move to somewhere like New York to do that? Or do you think nowadays you can create a scene almost anywhere, given the different options on the internet and all of these things? What's your thoughts on that? You are a New York.
Oh,
What do you think?
I think it depends on what kind of jazz you'd like to do. Like, can you just play solo
Okay,
and give a jazz solo concert? Then you can be anywhere, of course.
good point. Yeah.
But if you need a band for your music and you have a specific taste, and if you can find those players and then in your town, then you're okay. But if not, you might have to go somewhere to find those people.
Your story was great where you said you had to do a whole lot of other things. Your dream was to live a creative life, but you weren't too proud to say, I'm going to have to do different sorts of jobs to be able to pay my bills until it grows up.
Mhm.
A lot of younger people don't seem to understand that you might have to teach, you might have to do whatever, you might have to do something other than just playing if you can't make a living just playing, you know.
I think it's okay to do other works. I've done so many other works. Like in Japan, I was also working and like I was like a cleaner for a men's dorm for like some bankers. I was cleaning men's bathroom. Like
Oh, yeah.
I just like I did so many different kind of jobs to yeah to make a living. So it's okay, but I think you need to set a time limit.
Yes.
You know, like you need to have a deadline to achieve that, and then you quit someday,
And I
hopefully.
think I agree. I agree. And I think the other thing that's helped you live a sane life as a creative player is we touched on it early in the conversation that unlike a lot of musicians, you're not trying to be the best jazz violin player in the world. You're not trying to be the greatest virtuoso in the world, because I think that's a hard road to go. There's always going to be someone, if you ever get to the top of Everest, you're going to have 10 other people circling you, wanting to knock you off the edge. So I think in a way that if you take that pressure off yourself, you just want to be the best player you can be.
Jazz allows that. Like jazz has a such a wide, yeah, ground. Like not like a classical world. You can
Oh,
actually
yeah.
judge. You know.
I think you're absolutely right. And
Yeah.
it's a bit like reading music versus improvising. You know,
Mm.
those 8 bars have got 48,000 notes in it. And technically, to get a tick, you've got to play those 48,000 notes. When you stand up and play your solo, well, you're going to play the notes you want to play. Tomoko, I just want to play a short extract from a clip of you playing with a quartet at a club. You're playing Melancholy of a Crane, but it's a different drummer in the quartet this time. Who's the drummer?
That's Mark Ferber.
Okay. And you're playing the 4-string violin this time, not the
Hmm.
5-string. Do you remember any reason for that, or was it just something that you wanted to use the 4-string on?
I think five-string violin still is not comfortable as much as four-string violin. So I switch up sometimes depending on my mood. Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to ask you what dictates the change. You've answered it. It's your mood at the time. Now, another thing, and I noticed that you were pregnant with your son at the time you were playing in this club. And
Yes.
what do you remember about that? It's what a wonderful thing. Your son's hearing you playing music live at a club. Was it just something you felt that you're going to keep playing through your pregnancy, or what were you thinking there?
It just happened to be, yeah, like I mean, booking in New York is it's you can't really time things, and it was just happened to be when I was pregnant. But I had a amazing time. I felt loose for some reason. Like I don't know, like I think being pregnant is also like my body joints were loose, and then I felt really good, and
Oh, you're playing beautifully here.
yeah,
Now, of
just
course, it's in a club environment, so we're not in the beautiful studio recording environment, but the sound is still great. It captures that your violin sound and your accompanist play with a good sound. Obviously, in a live setting, it's not the pristine audio. Let's have a look at a little bit of this quartet version and you on 4-string violin. Tomoko, in New York, is there a stable live audience for your more sort of, I guess, introspective works? You know, you're not playing bebop in that case there, or you're not playing standards, you're playing a lot of your own compositions. In a city as big as New York, can you find decent quality places to present that type of music live, or is it a bit of a struggle even in a city like New York?
There are clubs that you can play your original music, um, like mine, and there are, I think, built-in audience. But the thing is that so many musicians want to play. So it's hard to book those gigs. It's hard, in general, it's hard to book um, gigs that you can play original music and not
Yeah.
just standards background type of music.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and get paid.
And get paid. I think that's the thing. You can
Yeah.
play anywhere for nothing, but getting
Mm,
paid is the challenge. But you
mm.
obviously seem to have put together a life where you've got a balance of, it's not about the money, it's about the creativity.
I don't have to get paid, but I always pay my musicians. That's like a that has to happen.
Wow.
It's like a New York musicians. If you wanna
Oh
hire
yeah.
someone and you wanna keep a good relationship with your musicians, you have to pay
Of
out of
course.
your pocket.
Of
That's
course.
that's protocol.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The beautiful song Smile, that beautiful song, was written by Charlie Chaplin. What a gorgeous song. And here you are again with the drummerless trio. You've just got a beautiful clip. We'll just look at a little bit of this. It's shot in black and white. You're just playing this timeless melody. Let's have a listen to Tomoko play Charlie Chaplin's beautiful Smile. You've been voted the #1 rising star violinist in Downbeat. I remember at the start you told me you're over there in Japan and you'd be secretly sneaking looking at these jazz magazines all those years ago to be #1 in the critics poll of the most famous jazz magazine in the world. You've played at major festivals around the world, the Newport Jazz Festival. You've played at the Lincoln Center, the Blue Note. You've had an album voted Best Jazz Album of the Year on Bandcamp. You've come so far from someone who really doubted herself that she could ever play jazz on the violin. Looking forward, what are your dreams for the future in music?
Not my music, but music in general.
What's your hopes and dreams for, I guess, your life in music in general? Yeah.
I want the music to have positive impact for the society or for the world. So I think music is powerful. Like my son, he's 4 years old, almost 5. He's listening to music every day. And he would just pick up something the Alexa plays,
Yes.
the Alexa.
Yeah.
And he knows how to do that. He can just play music with that device. But they'll just keep playing after a song, like they'll just pick their song, right? So he'll pick one song and the next thing he's hearing is what they pick. Internet,
yes,
the algorithm. And so the music is powerful and contagious and has a big impact on us, but I want the music to have a positive impact. So I want to create the music that's positive impact.
Well,
I think
that's a wonderful goal to have. And I have to remind you, your music already has had and continues to have a positive impact. There's a beautiful quartet version of Revenge of the Rabbit. It's back to the Sweet Georgia Brown quartet in that same beautiful sound space. Can you tell us a bit about this, The Revenge of the Rabbit? What's the background to that song?
That song was dedicated to Japanese folktale called Kachi Kachi Yama. It's a Kachi Kachi mountain. And in that tale, the rabbit comes out as he takes the revenge and defeat the evil raccoon that comes in the story. Okay. And then, those Japanese folk tales, sometimes it's a brutal story that I can't even tell you what happened to.
No.
Yeah. like a grim or,
yes.
Like a
grim story. Yeah.
The mythology or it's pretty brutal and bloody, thing.
Well, let's have a look. This is a happy section of music. We'll just look at the start there. Again, wonderful playing. What a quartet. Beautiful sound. Let's have a look at a little bit of Revenge of the Rabbit. Tomoko, you've told us what your hopes are for the future of your music. If you looked back at your life to date, everything you've done, right back from your start in Japan to all the things you've done in America, if you had your time over again, would you change anything? Would you do anything different? Or would you largely do the same in the way that you've done it?
Oh, that's a tricky question.
You've done that
Um,
journey, you've been down the journey. If we had a time machine and we could plonk you back there in Japan, would you change anything?
I think I did less of non-musical related work when
Okay.
I had a choice. When I had a choice. Um, I had to sometimes to pay the rent, but I still would have moved to the States. I would still move to New York. And but I'm thinking that because I didn't train myself to become a jazz musician early on, and I started self-teaching at age of 18. And
Yeah.
at that time, I was not really a good violinist. I had to relearn everything. Um, it just takes time to do that. It just takes time. I think I would do the same.
Well, you've come to a wonderful place in your life. You play beautifully. You really play beautifully. And one of the things I love about this podcast is I get the opportunity to play with every one of my guests. And I asked you what you'd like to do, and you said, I'd like to do Ornithology by Charlie Parker. And I thought, well, living in New York, what else would I expect? And it was such a thrill and an honour, Tomoko, to talk to you today, to hear your life story, and to play a duet with you. You're on that beautiful violin, and I cracked out the very first instrument I started on, the guitar. So it was a wonderful journey for me to share with you one of my very early memories of trying to play music. So we're going to go out with Ornithology. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? If someone wants to reach out, just to say hello or whatever, what's your preferred way for them to reach you?
Through my website, the tomokoomura.com, there is a way to connect
Yeah, and we'll
there.
put that link there for you. Thanks again, Tomoko.
Thank you, Brian.
A real joy. It's been a great
Great chat
experience.
with you. Yeah. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye.
Bye.